In this video, I'm going to be going over how to create a basic web page on your computer. Um, First, I'm going to go over how to download the application we're going to be using, and then I'm going to show you how to actually code the web page using HTML. The only things you're going to need for this video are working laptop or desktop, running Windows or Mac OS, VS Code, which I'm going to show how to install, and then about 20 minutes of your time. Alright, so first we're going to want to install VS Code. So open a browser tab, and look up Visual Studio Code, and it's probably going to be the first thing that pops up. Just make sure it's the right link. If you have Windows, you're going to want to download for Windows. If not, you go to other platforms and you can download for Mac, or if you have Linux, do that. But since I have Windows, I'm going to go ahead and install the installer for Windows. It's going to take a minute to download. Once your install is finished, you're going to want to go ahead and open it. You're going to have to go through all this stuff. Just leave it all as default, and then install, obviously. But since I already have it installed, I'm not going to do that. Once your install finishes, you should have a shortcut somewhere on your desktop. If not, you're going to have to search your apps for VS Code. So then you want to go ahead and open it by double clicking on it. And just to make this easy, I'm going to make a folder here on my desktop and just call it my webpage. Alright, you guys can either do this or you can make this folder somewhere in your file system. Doesn't really matter. I'm going to have it on my desktop so it's easy to find. Alright, so we want to go to this Explorer tab. It looks like a little folder, and you want to open a folder. And wherever you made your folder, you want to click on it and select it. Once we're in here, it should appear right here. See, this is the folder I made. And now I want to right click on it, create new file, and we're going to call this whatever you want to call it. For me, I'm going to call it my webpage.html. Just make sure that you have this final .html, or it's not going to recognize this as an HTML file. You want to click enter, and it should create the file for you and pop up in your text editor here. Once we get the folder and the file set up, we can actually start coding here. To start, I'm just going to show you some basics about HTML. HTML is composed of these things called tags. Here's what they look like. You have an opening tag that has, actually let me make this bigger, an opening tag with text in it, and a closing tag which is denoted by a backslash here. There's a lot of different types of tags, and you can put text in them. So for example, you can put text in it like that. There are also things called attributes that you can assign with different types of values, and they all mean different things. Here's what they look like. Let's just say this is what my attribute is called, and let's say this is the value. Obviously this doesn't actually mean anything. This is just for demonstration, just so you know what this stuff looks like. But this is what an attribute looks like, and then these are what tags look like, and this is how you can put text inside of tags. Anyway, if you typed any of that, you can delete it. First, we want to start out with a tag called a doctype tag. All this does is just tells the browser that this is an HTML file, and that's how it's going to want to read it. So next, we want to create an HTML tag with a closing tag. The rest of the web page is going to be all inside of these two tags here. So just make sure everything you put is between these tags. And the way that files are set up, you usually just tab out one time per each like nested layer here. So you see how we're between these two. We would put a tab here. It'll do it for you, but this is just to keep it making it look nice. Within these HTML tags, we actually want to create an attribute called lang. This attribute just basically tells the browser, like, okay, this is the language that this website uses. Next, we want to create a header tag. So it's just called head, not actually header. Within here, we want to create a meta tag. And within this meta tag, we want to set the attribute char set to UTF-8. And what this does is that it just tells the browser that the character set that this web page uses is this special UTF-8. Doesn't really matter. Just basically tells the browser how to read this file and what characters to use. So next we want to create our title tag. Make sure you get a closing tag as well. And within these two tags, we want to put the name of our web page. So for me, I'm going to put my first web page, That basically wraps up the head of the HTML file. Now we can get on to the body. So we start the body by creating a open and closing body tag here. Within this body tag, we're going to want to create a tag called h1. You can imagine this as just meaning header 1. It's basically just the largest. There's h1, h2, h3, and so on. Just different types of headers. So within here, I'm just going to call this whatever you want to make your web page about. I'm going to make mine about me. So I'm going to say about me. And then under that, I'm going to do a p tag, which stands for paragraph, and within here I'm just going to say some things about myself. I'll say the first one, my name is Mason, and the second one, just fill this up with stuff. You can do a few different P ones, or you can have it all within the same P. It's just up to you. So I'm going to go ahead and fill that in, probably speed that up just so that you don't have to sit here and watch it. So I ended up just putting it all in one P tag, and I also actually created another header here. I made this one the about me, an H2, and the H1 is just the title of my web page at the top. And yeah. So next we can do another section on our web page here. This one I'm going to call my interests. You can do anything you want. In this one I'm also going to do a list. So UL, which stands for unordered list, and for each list element we have to do li and place whatever text in the element inside of our li element here. So I'm just going to fill this in with some of my interests. I'll cut back whenever I'm done. Alright, and now that you've filled up your list here, I filled mine with just some of the stuff that I like to do in my free time. We can go ahead and create another section. I'm just going to keep going with the H2s here. And this one, I'm actually going to, I did not mean to do that. And this one, I'm going to call, I'll say, my pets. Yeah, we'll do that. Okay. And within here, we're going to make an image tag. For these image tags, we're going to have to do something special. We basically just have to give the file path or the name of the image that we're going to be using here. So that is denoted by src, meaning source, and then we have to get the actual image name. Okay, so before we actually add the image name here, we have to make sure that we actually have the images in the same folder as the HTML file. So wherever you made your HTML file, remember I made mine here on the desktop, you have to drag over some images from wherever else. So I got some just from my downloads folder here. I'm going to add those in, and they should pop up on your VS Code folder as well. If they don't, you might want to check to make sure they're in the same folder as your HTML file. But once you get them in here, you can go ahead and put the actual name of the image that you want on this attribute. So say I wanted to add this one, I actually just put it in word for word, or letter for letter in this case, into there, and you see how that underlines. It shows that it actually is going to the right image, and here's the image that's going to. This is my cat Rosie. So before that, I'm going to put an h3 tag and just this little header to show the name of my cat. And actually, I'm going to add another attribute here called alt. This basically just stands for alt text. It just is what loads if your image can't load on your page. So I'm just gonna, it's just like a description. Yeah, so I'm just gonna describe the picture, and I'm gonna do the same thing for the rest of my pets here. I'm just gonna put another header and image with alt text a few more times, and I'll cut to that whenever I'm finished. Okay, so I just finished that all up. Now I'm going to go ahead and show you guys how to run this thing on a browser. And for now, this is going to look really rudimentary and like basic. That's because we have absolutely zero styling, which I'll show you how to do towards the end of the video. So to run this file here on our browser, we're going to want to go over here to the little Run and Debug tab. It looks like a play button with a bug next to it. Click on it, click Run and Debug. It'll actually ask you where you want to run it. So you just choose whichever browser you want to use. And as you can see, we've got our header here, our About Me section, and then the interests that I put in. And then these huge images of my cats. And the reasons why they're so big is just because there is no formatting. Like I said, we're going to go ahead and do that at the end of the video. We'll make that look a lot nicer. But yeah. So I'm going to do one more section here, and then we can get on to the formatting. So for this last section, I'm going to call it My Favorite Songs, or just Favorite Songs. And for that, I'm going to make another tag called OL, which stands for ordered list, rather than the unordered list that we did earlier. And then we have to do the same thing here, where we put each element of the list inside of its own, like 2 list tags. So I'll say for my first favorite, actually, you know what, I'll fill this out, and then I'll cut back to whenever I have figured out what my favorite songs are. Alright, so I have finished my list. I actually changed it to just some pretty good songs because I don't want to embarrass myself on video. These are just some good songs in no particular order. So now that we've finished up the last section of our web page here, we can go ahead and move on to the formatting of our web page. So in order to do that, we're going to have to create a new file. So again, go over to this side, right click, click new file, and then you can call this whatever you want as long as you have the correct extension. I'm going to call mine style, and then the extension is .css. That's the programming language that we're going to be using. It's the one that works with HTML just to act as a formatting and styling language. So now that the file is created, we actually have to link it to our original web page here, or else it won't do anything with this file. It'll just exist separate. So in order to link it to the web page itself, we have to create a tag within our header called a link tag. And this link tag, we will be giving the attribute of href and assigning that to the file name that we used for our CSS file. Since mine is style.css, I'm going to use style.css. You just use whatever you came up with as a name. And as you can see, it autofills it as soon as I typed in S. And if I hold control, click on it, it takes me to this page. After we make the href attribute, we also have to make the rel attribute. This just means relation, so that in order to know what to do with this link here that is linked to the CSS, we're going to give it the relation of style sheet. This basically just tells the language that, okay, hey, this link links us to the style sheet that we want to use for this web page. Okay, so CSS works in a kind of a interesting way. Remember how we had these tags in HTML? For example, header, body, h1, things like that. All these different things are built into the language. And in CSS, I can go in and edit the natural style of these tags. So for example, one of the basic ones, we can just say h1 for now. I'm going to say h1, and then you do an open bracket and a closing bracket. Say I wanted to give it a different color, like a different text color. I will say color, which is the attribute name of text color in CSS, and then you can give it a color. There's a few different ways you can do it, or you can just type in the actual plain text word for the color. I'm going to say navy, because, West Virginia, yeah, go Mountaineers. And as you can see, if I were to go and run this by going into the HTML file, going through Run and Debug, and clicking Run and Debug, it's kind of hard to see, but if I make this a little bigger here, you can see that it made the H1 tag text color navy. So this really all just comes down to preference, but I'm gonna just do like some basic stuff to make the images look a little bit nicer and the headers a little bit nicer. And then if you want, you can also change the background color, which I will show how to do towards the end. So the next thing I'm going to do here is change the image tag size. So in order to do that, we want to do the same thing that we did with H1. We just do IMG and then an open bracket and close bracket. But this time we're going to change the height attribute of the image, and we're going to just do like a size of 200 pixels, px, standing for pixels. You can do 500, 400, but I'm just going to do 200 just so you can see the whole web page all on one screen. Makes it a little bit easier. And just to show that it actually does something, I'm going to go back into my HTML file, run and debug, and then as you can see, the images no longer take up the entire screen, and you can see each one of my cats respectively, and also you can see the section we added at the bottom. To continue on with the Mountaineers theme here, I'm going to do a few more color changes for our text, and then I'm also going to change the background color to be darker so that we can actually see the yellow text that we're going to make here. So for the H2 header, I'm going to make this gold. So H2, we're going to make the color equal to gold, and make sure you put a semicolon at the end of these, because if you were to stack these on top of each other, like if I did font size here, it wouldn't like it if I did if I didn't have that. It wouldn't recognize this as the end of line, so just make sure that you put that in. After the H2, I'm actually going to put a special tag up here called a root tag. You actually have to put a colon before it, because root is basically like the base of our web page, like the root of a tree. So the root, by default, we want the background color be equal to gray. And I'm actually going to click on this little color panel here, and I'm going to drag it down. You can change these things manually if you'd like. I'm going to make mine a little bit darker just so that it's a little bit easier to read the yellow. And I'm also going to change the default color of text to white so that it stands out well against the dark background that we're going to use. And I'm going to run this just to show you what it looks like. As you can see here, all the colors have been applied, and it's not terribly hard to read the different headers that we have. One last thing I'm going to change is I don't really like how these images are stacked up on top of each other like this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a container tag to center all of these together and make them stack horizontally rather than vertically. So in order to create a custom attribute, it's actually called a class if it's a custom one. So in order to create a class, we want to start with a dot, and then I'm going to name mine container or image container just for ease of readability here. So I'm going to say image container, and then the same thing where it's an open bracket and a closed bracket. So the way that we're going to have our images stack horizontally rather than vertically is we're going to enable this feature called flex, and the way we do that is we assign the display attribute flex, and this basically allows us to use special layout attributes such as flex direction, which we are going to set to row, because by default it is set to column, meaning that everything is stacked in like a column form, and we want this specific tag with this attribute or with this class to display as a row in layout from left to right rather than up and down. So for the rest of the video, I'm actually going to keep the web page open on the left side of my screen so we can see what this looks like. So we actually haven't done anything with this class yet. We made it here, but we haven't actually applied it anywhere. So the way that we're going to do that is we want to encase this whole section here inside of a what is called a span element. So the way you do that is you're going to create a opening span tag right here, and in that it'll probably make the closing one for you. You just want to move that to the end of this section. Make sure your indentations are set up right, and the way that you can indent this whole thing at once is highlight from here to here. Just make sure you have the lines highlighted, and you can click tab and it'll automatically move everything over one indentation. And as you can see, this little line connects these two elements, showing that this is, these are all connected. And now we want to actually assign the class attribute equal to whatever we came up with for the this image container right here. So since mine is image container, I'm going to input the name being image container. You don't actually include the dot. That is just like kind of a thing to tell you what it really is. And now that we have done that, I can actually click this little green button up here to restart our web page, and it'll automatically refresh what the web page looks like. If I do that, as you can see, now our images are not stacked up and down. However, we're a little bit messy with the text. So the reason why that is happening is because I accidentally put this h2 tag within the span element. What I'm going to do is move that out, put it above here. Let me save that, and I'll refresh. So now the header is fixed, but these headers within here are still a little messed up. The way I'm going to fix that is actually just encase each of these two things, so the header and the image, within their own two span tags as well, similar to what we did with this whole section. So I'm just going to copy this similarly, and what I'm going to do is do a span opening and closing tag, get rid of the closing tag, and move it to the end of the first image. So do that by doing this, and then highlight this and indent that. And now if I refresh the page, it is correctly on the top of the image rather than kind of being off to the side all weird. So I'm going to repeat that process, putting span elements, encasing each of the header and images, and then I'll cut to that when I'm done. Now that I've done that, I can refresh the page here, and as you can see, they all line up the way that I kind of want them to. However, you can see that these are actually touching each other, which I'm not a huge fan of. I'm going to do some nitpicky stuff just to kind of fix that. There is a attribute in CSS called gap, which basically just does what it sounds like it does. It creates a gap between things. So I'm going to make a pretty small gap, just say like 20 pixels. And what that's going to do is put gaps between each one of these little elements in here. So I'm going to refresh the page, makes gaps here. And then one final thing, I'm going to make the top margin negative. As you can see, there's like a pretty big white space gap here. I'm not a huge fan of that. I'm not exactly sure why it's doing that. It probably has to do with all the span elements and their margins. But what I'm going to do to fix that is set the margin top attribute to negative 30 pixels. It really doesn't have to be 30 on the dot. It can be anything. I'm just kind of using my eye and choosing it depending on what I think it looks better. So I'll refresh that, and I'd say that looks pretty similar to the rest of them. So I'm happy with this. So if at any point during the video you accidentally tried to run and debug inside of the styles.css and click Chrome, VS Code's going to automatically try to make a launch.json file. You don't want this. This is something too complicated. So if you were to try to go back and actually run this, it doesn't look the same, and it's going to give you an error similar to this. So the way that you fix that is you literally just go to the .vscode folder that was created within your folder, and you just want to right click on it and delete it. Move it to recycling bin, and then once you go back here and make sure you're in the HTML file this time, it should allow you to run and debug correctly, and your web page should show up. One other issue I kind of forgot to mention was throughout the video, you should be saving each one of these files. The way that you can do that, there's a quick way. You can click Control and S at the same time on Windows. On Mac, I believe it is Command S. But if that doesn't work, you can go to File, and then you scroll down to Save, and you want to make sure you save both of these files before you run them. Um, if you weren't able to run the web page before, that was likely your issue.